The distant stars glistened in the void, mocking humanity's helplessness as the massive warships of the Galactic Empire loomed over Earth's moon. The Empire's cold, calculating forces had decimated resistance after resistance. Humanity, viewed as a primitive species, had no place in the Empire's grand design. The human race was outgunned, outclassed, and to the Empire, nothing more than an inconvenience. But on the outskirts of the shattered human colony on Vortak 9, 3 men had begun to change that narrative. Caleb Thompson crouched low, his fingers tightening around the stock of his rifle. The hum of the alien shuttle above them was deafening. The black sniper from Detroit, his skin glistening with sweat, could taste the sharp tang of failure in the air. His team had been ambushed, their positions compromised by an unexpected swarm of insectoid scouts. The humans had held out for hours, but it was clear now. The Empire's forces were too overwhelming. The snipers had made their last stand. "Stay focused," Caleb muttered under his breath, as his eyes flicked between his scope and the huddled survivors. Every shot counted. His team was pinned down, and the aliens had their sights set on them. His breath slowed, his pulse steady. This was what he'd trained for. He just needed to outlast them. Behind him, Miguel Ortega cursed under his breath, eyes darting over the horizon. He was the technological expert of their unit, a Mexican-American from San Antonio with a mind as quick as his hands. Miguel's suit, a lightweight prototype, was beginning to malfunction, the integration of alien tech that once enhanced their defenses now fraying under pressure. "Damn it! I need more time to recalibrate," Miguel muttered as he fiddled with his wrist panel, trying to stabilize his cloaking field. He had created the device himself, blending human ingenuity with salvaged alien technology. But now, it was failing him at the worst possible moment. It kept them hidden for weeks, but as the shuttle above them began to deploy drop ships, the technology that had kept them one step ahead was starting to flicker. Isaiah Johnson stood just behind them, scanning the horizon. The Native American from Montana was the team strategist, a man of few words, but countless ideas. His keen mind could see the battlefield in ways others couldn't, calculating enemy movements in his head before they even happened. To his comrades, he was the rock, solid, steady, unshaken. But even Isaiah was starting to doubt. "We need to fall back," he finally said, his voice low but firm. "Now." "Retreat is not an option," Caleb responded immediately, not even looking away from his rifle scope. He wasn't ready to let the human resistance crumble like this. Not after everything they'd been through. But Isaiah didn't argue. He could see it, too, the inevitable. The Empire's forces were too vast, their technology too advanced. Even the humans' greatest snipers, their best soldiers, would never hold up against the sheer scale of their enemy. It had been a mistake to underestimate the Empire's reach, a mistake they'd all paid for. Yet, the desperation of the moment drove something else deep into Isaiah's chest, an urge to survive, to find another way. Caleb fired. His bullets streaked across the sky, piercing the alien commander's head with an almost mechanical precision. One down, but it was too late. The remaining drop ships landed, and within moments, alien warriors poured out, a torrent of armed death. The trio was outnumbered, outmatched. They had no way out. Miguel's suit malfunctioned. Caleb's ammo supply was running low. Isaiah's strategies could only do so much. For a moment, everything felt as if it were on the brink of collapse. The sky seemed to grow darker, the sense of inevitability heavier with every passing second. But then Caleb, ever determined, took a deep breath and said, "We fight. We fight until the last breath." Miguel wasn't sure whether the words were meant to rally them or simply serve as an affirmation of their fate. Either way, the battle raged on. In the heat of combat, something strange happened. Despite the overwhelming odds, despite everything pointing to failure, the 3 men found a strange rhythm in the chaos. Caleb's sniper rifle became an extension of himself, each shot a masterpiece of patience and precision, each kill a statement of defiance against the Empire's condescension. Miguel, ever the quick thinker, turned his suit's malfunctioning cloaking device into a weapon of deception. He could vanish for just long enough to evade detection, picking off enemies from impossible angles. And Isaiah, he was everywhere. His movements seemed preordained, each step calculated, each order cutting through the madness like a blade through cloth. It wasn't enough. The battle still swung in favor of the Empire, but something had changed. The three men had discovered something new about themselves. They were not just snipers. They were a team, three individuals who, in the face of impossible odds, had found something that transcended their skills. They were human. As the smoke of battle began to settle, and the remnants of the human resistance huddled together in the shadow of the destroyed colony, Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah retreated, carrying their fallen comrades with them. The human casualties were immense. The Empire's fleet remained undefeated, its forces still laughing at their foolishness. But there was something more beneath that laughter. A growing suspicion that perhaps humanity, despite their primitive status, could not be so easily swept away. In the dim light of their retreat, Miguel paused, his hand still grasping a fragment of alien technology, and turned to Caleb. "We're not done. Not yet. They've underestimated us." Caleb's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. He said nothing, but Isaiah, with his mind always 2 steps ahead, simply nodded. "This isn't the end," Isaiah murmured, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the Empire's ships loomed large. "It's just the beginning." The conflict wasn't over. Humanity had lost this battle, but in that loss, they had uncovered the spark of something greater, the understanding that they were not weak. They were resilient. They would adapt, innovate, and fight back. The Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake. They thought humanity was a dying ember, but they would soon learn that the fire was only just starting to burn. And Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah would be the ones to show them. The cold winds of Vortak, 9 howled through the barren terrain, carrying with them the scent of rust and alien machinery. Caleb Thompson crouched low in the dirt, his rifle in hand, scanning the horizon. The failures of the previous battle hung heavy in his mind, each missed opportunity a weight on his shoulders. They had been crushed by the Empire's superior firepower, but this time he wasn't ready to accept defeat. Not again. "I need a better plan," he muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he studied the desolate landscape. The mission was simple: resupply, regroup, and rethink, but Caleb knew they couldn't afford another failure. The Galactic Empire would never underestimate them again if they didn't rise to the challenge. Behind him, Miguel Ortega was hunched over his makeshift workbench, tinkering with a broken sensor array. His hands moved quickly, almost instinctively, as his mind raced through the possibilities. The alien tech they'd salvaged from a previous battle had been invaluable, but the constant strain of modifying it for human use had left its mark. The systems were starting to degrade, and the urgency was clear. "Caleb, I can fix this," Miguel called, his voice tinged with frustration. "But I need more time. If I can get the cloaking field back online, we can stay hidden long enough to strike first." Caleb glanced over his shoulder, his dark eyes sharp. "Time's not on our side, Miguel. We need more than just tech to beat them. We need a strategy they won't see coming." Isaiah Johnson, the quiet strategist of their team, stood to the side, his expression unreadable as always. He had a way of seeing the battlefield as a puzzle, each piece fitting into a larger picture that no one else could see. The Montana native wasn't one for words, but his mind never stopped working. As Caleb and Miguel bickered, Isaiah's eyes moved across the landscape, his focus unwavering. "We need to change the game," Isaiah said finally, his voice low but firm. "We've been fighting like we're the ones who have to adapt. What if we force them to adapt instead?" Caleb looked at Isaiah intrigued. "What are you thinking?" Isaiah stood up straight, his broad shoulders shifting beneath his tactical gear. "We stop thinking like we're the underdogs. We start using what we've got in ways they've never seen. They think they're superior because of their technology. But what if we use their own arrogance against them?" Miguel's eyes brightened as he caught on. "You mean we hit them where it hurts, get them to underestimate us even more?" "That's right," Isaiah replied. "We use the terrain, the weather, the unexpected. They think they can wipe us out because they have the best gear, the biggest ships. Let's make that their weakness." Caleb let out a slow breath. You're suggesting guerrilla tactics, Isaiah? The Empires never had to deal with that before. It's not just guerrilla tactics, Isaiah clarified. It's a game of perception. We hit them hard and fast, then vanish before they can retaliate. We're not just snipers anymore. We're ghosts in the machine. Miguel grinned. I like that. I can work with that. The tech can do more than just cloak us. It can mislead them, make them think we're somewhere we're not. The plan was set into motion quickly. Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah spent the next few days working in tandem, building on each other's strengths. Caleb worked on honing his long-range shooting, studying the behavior of their enemies' patrols, looking for patterns. Miguel labored over their technology, piecing together fragments of alien weaponry and integrating them with the best of human ingenuity. Isaiah, ever the strategist, built simulations of the battlefield in his mind, anticipating every move, every contingency. Their first test came sooner than expected. A patrol of alien soldiers, large, insect-like creatures with powerful exoskeletons and advanced weaponry, had detected their presence. The Empire was relentless, and they had learned from a last encounter, now deploying sensors and traps to root out any survivors. As Caleb scanned the horizon from his perch, he saw them, 4 of the insectoid soldiers moving in a tight formation, their weapons trained forward. They had no idea that the human resistance was anything but a broken shell of its former self. They were overconfident, marching right into their trap. Isaiah's voice came over the comms, calm and precise. 3 minutes until they passed the ridge. Caleb, you take the one on the far right. Miguel, you're with me. We hit them from 2 angles. Caleb nodded, his eyes never leaving the advancing patrol. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears, but he focused, his breath slow and controlled. He had done this 1,000 times before. This time it would be different. He would make sure of it. At the right moment, Caleb squeezed the trigger. The bullet cut through the air with a whisper, striking the first alien square between the eyes. Before the others could react, Miguel's tech came into play. A burst of static filled the air, and the soldiers suddenly found themselves facing a decoy, an image of Caleb's position created by the cloaking field that distorted the light and created the illusion of movement. Now, Isaiah ordered. Miguel's modified laser rifle fired, catching the second alien off guard. Caleb took down the third with a single precise shot. Only one remained, and the alien, now panicked, began to scan the surroundings for any sign of the attackers. But it was too late. Isaiah's mental simulations had predicted the last move, and with a single command, the final soldier was caught in a trap. As the dust settled and the last alien crumpled to the ground, the trio allowed themselves a moment to breathe. They had done it, used their ingenuity and resources to take down an enemy that had once seemed invincible. But Caleb knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not be so easily fooled again. Nice work, Miguel said, wiping his brow. That was almost too easy. Isaiah didn't respond at first, his eyes scanning the wreckage of the alien patrol. He was thinking ahead, his mind already calculating the next move. We've just scratched the surface. They'll be back in force. We need to keep them guessing. Caleb stood, wiping the dirt from his gloves. Then we hit them harder. We make them pay for thinking we're weak. Miguel chuckled, his fingers tapping on his wrist console as he worked to gather the alien tech. We'll give them a show they won't forget. As they moved out of the wreckage, each of them knew something had changed. This small victory was a sign, a shift in the momentum. The Galactic Empire might still think they were the superior force, but Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah were beginning to prove that human adaptability, creativity, and spirit were the ultimate weapons. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. And with each battle, they would grow stronger. The war was far from over, but the tide had started to turn. The hum of the Empire's ships echoed across the planet's sky, a constant reminder of humanity's fragile existence beneath their cold, relentless gaze. Caleb Thompson stood on the ridge overlooking the vast, war-torn plains of Vortak 9. The landscape was a scarred monument to their losses, a reminder of the overwhelming force that had crushed the human resistance before. But that had been before. Now they were different. Now they were fighters. And they were about to show the Empire just how wrong they were. Miguel Ortega adjusted his wrist console, the flickering lights casting an eerie glow over his face. He had spent the past week perfecting a new piece of technology, an electromagnetic pulse device scavenged from an Empire destroyer. It had cost them several sleepless nights and the lives of 2 other soldiers in a skirmish, but was worth it. The device would disable the Empire's communications, disrupt their targeting systems, and give them a window of opportunity to strike. "You sure this will work?" Caleb asked, his voice gruff but filled with a rare sense of hope. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the Empire's fleet was preparing to land. If they succeeded today, it could turn the tide of the war. Miguel didn't look up. His hands flew over the device, making final adjustments. "It has to work. We've got one shot at this, Caleb. If it doesn't, we're dead." Isaiah Johnson stood beside them, his gaze as steady as ever, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. The Montana native had seen enough battles to know how fleeting victory could be. But this was different. This time, they weren't just playing defense, they were going on the offensive. The Empire's overconfidence had made them vulnerable. They had failed to account for the humans' ability to adapt to surprise. "I've studied their movements," Isaiah said, his low voice cutting through the tension. "They're deploying ground forces in 5-minute intervals. We take out their comms, hit their supply lines, and we might just force them to pull back. But we need to do it fast. They'll retaliate." Caleb turned to face Isaiah. There was a calmness in his eyes, the kind of clarity that came from knowing what was at stake. "We hit them hard. No hesitation. We take out their leadership, leave them scrambling. Let's see how they handle chaos." Miguel finished his final adjustment and stood up, stepping back to survey their makeshift command center. "EMP is ready. I've marked their comm relay points. If we time it right, we can isolate their ground forces and pick them off one by one." For a brief moment, the 3 men stood together, each understanding the gravity of what they were about to do. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving to the galaxy that humans weren't just another species to be trampled on. They were a force to be reckoned with. The plan was set into motion. They moved swiftly across the rugged terrain, using every ounce of stealth and skill they had honed over the past few months. Caleb led the way, his sniper rifle slung across his back, every step calculated and precise. Miguel followed closely behind, his mind racing as he double-checked the coordinates for the EMP detonation. Isaiah brought up the rear, ever watchful, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. They reached the first comm relay point just as the Empire's ground forces began to land. Caleb's breath caught in his chest as the first alien transport touched down, a massive machine bristling with weapons. They were here in force, more than they had ever encountered before. "Ready?" Caleb whispered. Miguel nodded, his fingers twitching at the controls. "Let's do this." With a quiet beep, the EMP device activated. A pulse rippled through the air, invisible but powerful, and suddenly the Empire's communication systems went dark. The alien transports faltered, their orders lost in the ether. Caleb's pulse quickened. This was their moment. "Move out," Isaiah said, his voice steady. "We take their leaders first." The 3 men split up, moving like shadows through the alien encampment. Caleb took the high ground, positioning himself on a ridge that overlooked the battlefield. His rifle settled in his hands as he scanned the area, his eyes picking out targets with deadly precision. The first officer was a large, armored alien, a commanding presence among the rest of the forces. Caleb didn't hesitate. His shot rang out, and the officer crumpled to the ground, a neat hole in the center of his chest. The chaos was immediate. Isaiah moved swiftly through the lower ground, picking off soldiers with brutal efficiency. Each shot was a calculated strike, each movement deliberate. He had learned long ago that the key to survival was to stay unpredictable, to make every action count. With the Empire's comms down, their forces were thrown into disarray. They had no idea where the next shot would come from, and that confusion was their weakness. Miguel wasn't as quiet, but he was just as deadly. He used the alien tech he had scavenged to his advantage, manipulating the environment to create false signals and decoys. The Empire soldiers found themselves chasing shadows, and in that confusion, Miguel moved in, his modified plasma rifle cutting through the air. Every shot found its mark. But even in the chaos, Caleb knew they couldn't let up. The Empire wouldn't stay off balance for long. As the first few waves of soldiers fell, the enemy began to regroup. A new set of orders came through, one that Caleb could see clearly through the scope of his rifle. The Empire was sending in their elite troops to reclaim control. "They're sending in the heavy hitters," Caleb said, his voice tight. We need to wrap this up now. Isaiah, who had been coordinating the assault on the ground, didn't flinch. We can't stop now. We've got them on the ropes. Let's finish it. The three men closed in on the final objective, the Empire's main supply depot. They had to take it down, or the Empire's retaliatory forces would be unstoppable. Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah fought their way through the increasingly organized resistance, their movements synchronized, their resolve unbreakable. The final stretch was the most dangerous. The Empire's elite soldiers were now aware of the human threat, and they came at them with everything they had. But Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah had one advantage, the element of surprise. With a final well-placed shot, Caleb disabled the main power grid, and the entire facility went dark. The Empire's forces were thrown into chaos as their weapons and transport systems went offline. The humans had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow that the Empire couldn't ignore. As the dust settled and the last of the Empire's forces retreated, Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah stood over the smoldering wreckage of the supply depot. They had achieved the impossible. The Empire had been forced to respond to them, and that was something they had never expected. "We did it," Miguel said, his voice filled with disbelief. Caleb nodded, his expression grim but proud. "For now. But this is only the beginning." Isaiah's gaze shifted to the horizon, his thoughts already on the next move. "We've made our mark. But the war isn't over. We've only shown them we're not weak. Now we need to show them we're a threat they can't ignore." And with that, they turned their eyes to the stars, ready for whatever came next. The moment Caleb Thompson stepped into the ruins of the Empire's fortress, the weight of their actions began to settle in. The battle had been long, brutal, and bloody, but they had come out victorious. Yet, the victory was bittersweet. He could hear the distant hum of Empire warships regrouping for a counterattack. They had fought back, but the real fight was just beginning. "We've made our mark," Caleb muttered, adjusting the strap of his rifle. His words were resolute, but the worry was palpable in his eyes. The Empire wouldn't forget this. Not after today. Miguel Ortega walked up beside him, eyes scanning the smoldering wreckage around them. "Yeah, we made them bleed. But we've only just gotten their attention. You think they'll pull back after this?" "No," Caleb said firmly. "The Empire's like a wolf that's been poked with a stick. It'll come after us harder than ever." Isaiah Johnson stood a little farther off, looking over their fallen foes. His tall frame was silhouetted against the firelight, his face unreadable as always. He was calculating, always thinking several moves ahead. His sharp mind had been their greatest asset since the beginning, and now it seemed to be working overtime. "They won't retreat," Isaiah said finally, his voice like gravel. "The Empire doesn't know how to pull back. They'll come at us with everything they have, try to crush us under the weight of their forces. But this time, it's different. We've shown them they can't just squash us like insects." Caleb nodded, his mind already racing. "We need to be ready for that. We've gotten their attention, and they won't forget what we did here today." "I've got some ideas," Miguel said, turning back to the wreckage of the fortress, his mind already shifting into overdrive. "We've got enough alien tech to keep playing the game. But we'll need more time to get the systems running at full capacity." "Time is something we don't have," Caleb shot back. He was never one to sit idly. They had hit the Empire hard, but he knew they couldn't afford to waste any more precious moments. The counterattack was inevitable, and they needed to act fast. Isaiah stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "The next phase is going to be about deception. We need to make them believe they're facing more than just a handful of humans. We make them think we're a full-scale force, a real threat. If we can do that, we can pull them off balance." Caleb's eyes flicked to the horizon, where the first signs of the Empire's reinforcements were visible. The sky was thick with the shadows of warships, each one more formidable than the last. "And how do we do that?" Isaiah's expression remained unchanged. "We hit them in places they won't expect. We create chaos, control the narrative. The Empire thrives on precision, on perfect order. We give them chaos, and they'll lose their edge." Miguel's hands were already busy at work, fiddling with the controls of one of the alien communication devices they had salvaged. "I can modify the cloaking tech again, make it look like we've got a whole army of troops. We can amplify the signals, create false radar sweeps. The Empire won't know which way is up." "Then let's get to work," Caleb said, his voice filled with determination. "We don't wait for them to make their move. We strike first. The plan was set into motion swiftly. Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah each took their designated roles, moving quickly to execute their strategy. They needed to make the Empire believe they were facing a united human front, one that was far more dangerous than they had anticipated. They moved like shadows through the night, setting traps, planting false signals, and positioning themselves in key locations. Caleb had the job of creating the illusion of a forward base, using his sharp shooting to pick off Empire scouts from a distance. Miguel worked tirelessly, tinkering with the alien tech, ensuring that their deceptions were flawless. Isaiah, as always, kept a cool head, coordinating their movements and ensuring that each piece of the puzzle fit together. The first wave of Empire soldiers was swift, their patrols scanning the landscape for any sign of resistance. They had no idea what they were walking into. The deception was working perfectly. Caleb and Isaiah watched from their high ground as the enemy stumbled into their traps, their communications scrambled by Miguel's tech. The first few soldiers fell without ever seeing their attackers. But the Empire was nothing if not adaptive. As the traps continued to ensnare them, they began to regroup, coordinating more effectively. It wasn't long before the Empire started to understand the nature of the threat they were facing. The humans weren't playing by the rules they knew. They weren't fighting as soldiers, they were fighting like ghosts, like shadows, using the environment and the technology to their advantage. "They're catching on," Caleb muttered as he watched the enemy pull back and regroup. "They'll send in their elites soon. We've got to move fast." Isaiah's eyes never left the battlefield. "We keep up the pressure. We don't give them a chance to breathe. If they think they're facing a full resistance, they'll waste resources trying to fight a war on two fronts. That's where we hit them next." The battle raged on through the night. The Empire's forces tried to adapt, bringing in heavy artillery and reinforcements, but the humans were always one step ahead. Caleb's long-range shots kept the Empire commanders on edge, Miguel's interference kept their technology in disarray, and Isaiah's strategies kept them guessing. But the clock was ticking. Caleb could feel it in his bones. The Empire's elites were on their way. They would no longer fall for the illusion of an army. They would come after them with everything they had. As dawn broke over the war-torn plains, the first wave of elite soldiers arrived. These were the Empire's best, their fiercest warriors, outfitted with the latest weapons and armor. Caleb's breath hitched as he saw them descend from their transports, their eyes scanning the battlefield with a sense of cold determination. "This is it," Caleb said, his voice steady. "The Empire's bringing out their heavy hitters." Isaiah turned to face him, his face grim but resolute. "We've come this far. We don't stop now. We hit them where it hurts." And then they moved. Together. The final phase of their battle had begun, and they wouldn't stop until the Empire knew they had faced something far beyond their expectations. Caleb, Miguel, and Isaiah had shown the Empire that they weren't just humans to be dismissed. They had proven they were a force, a challenge the Empire couldn't ignore. But now, as the Empire's elites closed in, they would face the ultimate test. The fate of the galaxy rested in their hands.